MSI sent over this GE72VR. It's a very interesting laptop, comes in at a relatively budget price point considering what these laptops are these days, and we're going to take a look at it, so do stick around. Starting off with the specs of the laptop that I have here, it's an i7-7700HQ, a GTX 1050 Ti, 16 gigs of DDR4 SD RAM, as well as a 128 gig SSD or M.2 SSD, as well as a 1TB hard drive to support it. It's also a 120Hz display. This is a TN panel, and that is actually quite an important point that we'll come on to in just a second as we talk a little bit more about the laptop. Taking a look around, we have a very stylish overall laptop here. On the back of the clamshell, you have brushed aluminium as well as that illuminated MSI logo. You also have brushed aluminium on the keyboard plate as well, although the bottom is entirely plastic. This is a nice kind of balance between the nice high-end feel of the areas that you actually touch and being a fingerprint magnet, and obviously the overall fairly robust build quality that's actually pretty impressive. Taking a look at the I/O, on the left we have the Kensington lock, killer Ethernet, two USB 3.0 ports, the Type-C port, which I believe doesn't feature Thunderbolt 3, which is something to note, as well as the headphone and microphone jacks, HDMI ports, and mini display ports. On the right you have the DC in, a USB 2 port, most likely for a mouse, an SD card reader, and a disk drive? Why is there a disk drive? Taking a look inside, we can see how much space this takes up. I mean, do bear in mind that that amount of space could be easily used for an extra SSD, better cooling, better graphics, and specifically better cooling is something that I want to kind of take a look at in just a second. The cooling for the GPU is pretty substantial. You have 3 heat pipes matched to both of the fan heat sinked areas there, so that's quite impressive, and that's why the temperatures for the GPU are pretty low, whereas the CPU only has 2 heat pipes that only go to one side of the actual cooling system, the sort of cooler boost system, which means that the CPU does run fairly hot. Taking a look at the rest of the internal design, if you're willing to void the warranty, which actually those stickers that say, you know, warranty void if removed or tampered with, are actually illegal in America, so if you're in the USA you can actually ignore those, but either way, point is that if you're willing to void your warranty, you can upgrade the hard drive and the SSD and the RAM pretty easily, so that is quite a nice feature if you do plan on having it for a relatively long time, although the GPU and the CPU are both soldered, so you can improve those. Taking a look inside the clamshell, you can see the actually pretty nice keyboard. As I said, there's brushed aluminium all around here, and while that is a little bit of a fingerprint magnet, it does add to the sort of light quality feel that the laptop has, and the keyboard to type on is actually a very pleasant experience. The sort of scissor key type style here isn't too mushy, it's not too hard to press, it's just the right balance of a nice typing feel. I do wish that they would make it in the ISO layout with the sort of longer enter key and that sort of thing. That would be my personal preference, and again, while you can switch the Windows and the FN key around in the BIOS and in MSI software, it'd be really nice if they were just the other way around. I understand that it's a gaming feature, so you don't accidentally press the Windows key, but especially considering that the FN functions are FN, which is all the way on the left, and the arrow keys and stuff like that, and I normally use stuff like Windows E to open Windows Explorer. Having to use 2 hands to do those normally one-handed tasks is a little bit annoying, and I wish that they were the other way around, just out of the factory, but either way, that is the main thing. The keyboard is quite nice to type on. The trackpad is also quite a nice experience. The palm rejection was a couple of times wasn't perfect here, so that is something to be aware of, but it is still an overall very nice feel. You've got 2-finger scrolling, you've got pinch to zoom and that sort of thing, so overall a pretty nice experience. So as I mentioned, the display is a 120Hz TN panel. This is great for gaming, although I'll mention that in a second, but the main thing for me is because other MSI laptops, I've come to expect IPS quality panels from them. Because this is TN, this really doesn't have that great viewing angles. Side to side isn't too bad, but from above or below it really isn't that great. Now it's not too much of an issue considering this is a laptop with a hinge, so you can just move the display, but it is important to note that if you want the nice viewing angles that most MSI laptops have, this one might not be for you. Now the reason I mentioned the 120Hz being good for gaming, but I'll mention it later, is because this laptop features a GTX 1050 Ti. Now that's not the most powerful graphics card in the world, it's certainly not too bad, but at the same time, if you're playing games on high or ultra settings, this laptop isn't quite capable of actually hitting much more than 60 FPS. Now don't get me wrong, 60 FPS is perfectly fine for a lot of games, but considering that they're equipping this laptop with a 120Hz display, it'd be nice to see them equipping it with a graphics card that can actually push up to that, even a GTX 1063 gig or even a 1066 gig if you can push that far. VR would be a great alternative to the 1050 Ti, at least, which is in this machine, because the gaming results, as you'll see in a second, aren't quite as high as you might necessarily hope they be if you're running 120Hz display. Speaking of gaming performance, as you can see, it doesn't do too badly when it comes to 3D Mark Firstrike. Feel free to take a look at the results, and compare these to other results on 3D Mark's website, but taking a look at the more actual real-world game performance in these sort of AAA, relatively hard-to-run titles, you're looking at about 66 to 70 FPS average on stuff like Dirt Rally on ultra settings, Doom using Vulkan on ultra settings. One thing to note though is if you are using, playing games like League of Legends, Dota, or CSGO, you're likely going to be seeing a lot higher FPS here. GTA 5 I think has a lot of Nvidia optimizations in it, meaning that running at very high settings you're seeing 91 FPS average here, which is actually really impressive and a very nice overall experience. With Unigine Heaven, it's running at about 60 FPS average, I think it was 58 to be precise, so still an impressive score, still nice and smooth, and still going to last you a few years in terms of gaming. When it comes to temperatures though, because of that CPU cooling design, we're seeing 84 degrees on the CPU, and that side of things does get quite loud, whereas the GPU fans and the GPU temperatures are actually pretty low at about 59 degrees. In terms of battery life, the laptop didn't exactly excel here. In the PC Mark battery life test, this only got an hour and a half to an hour and 40 minutes, which really isn't exceptional, especially considering that newer Ultrabooks, even especially Ultrabooks at this sort of price point, are currently getting 4 to 6 hours. Now, I'd personally expect somewhere between 3 and 4 hours of general web browsing use for this laptop, on battery, so that's not too bad. It's fairly standard when it comes to that, but it is something to note as well if you are planning on buying this for a university laptop or something like that you might require a power plug a little bit more often than some of the other models. So to round this off before we go into scoring, I want to say that this is actually quite a nice laptop. The overall usage experience was really impressive. I was really impressed by the keyboard and the trackpad here, although the trackpad did have a few sort of palm rejection issues here. It's a real shame about the display not being perfect in terms of viewing angles, and I think it's a little bit underpowered for the price. I think if they had a 60Hz IPS or IPS equivalent type monitor or panel for this laptop, even though it's still a G-Sex 1050 Ti and not going to be pushing massively high frame rates, I think that would be just a little bit of a better experience for you rather than putting a 120Hz display and not quite hitting it. In terms of scoring, I'm going to go with a 3.5 for value for money, a 4 for performance, that's a tongue twister, as well as a 4 for functionality, and I'm going to go with a 4.5 for styling and a 4 for TechteamGB score. It's a quite impressive laptop. I'm going to give it the silver award. I think for me, if you fit into the price category of where this sits, as well as someone who doesn't necessarily need all the power in the world, but likes a solid build quality, very nice overall, usage experience laptop, this one is certainly one to take a look at. If you enjoyed the video and found it useful, please do let me know in the comments down below, and of course subscribe, hit the like button and share the video. That's the best thing you can do to help me out here. If you want to pick one of these laptops up, I'll leave a link to Overclockers UK and Amazon in the links down below, as well as some more generic Amazon and Overclockers UK affiliate links. So if you're ever buying anything on any of those places, it'd be awesome if you could use those links. Otherwise, feel free to check me on Facebook and Twitter. I'll leave a couple of videos over here for you to check out, and the subscribe button over on this side for you. And otherwise, yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and obviously found it useful and informative, and we'll see you all in the next one.